In a small, quiet town nestled between rolling hills and ancient forests, life was peaceful, almost too peaceful. The residents had their routines, and though they didn't have much, they were content. Yet, there were times when the ordinary gave way to the extraordinary, moments when life shifted in ways no one expected. This was one of those moments. It all began on an ordinary Thursday morning, when a young woman arrived in town. She wasn't from around here. Her clothes were unlike anything anyone had seen before, and her presence had an aura that seemed out of place, like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. The townspeople went about their business, casting curious glances her way, but she didn't seem to mind. She moved with purpose, like someone who knew exactly where they were going, yet at the same time, she was an enigma. Her name, though, was a mystery to the town. She didn't introduce herself to anyone. She didn't ask for directions or interact much with anyone. But her eyes, those strikingly bright eyes, seemed to pierce through everything and everyone, as though she was seeing something the rest of them couldn't. It was a kind of look that made people uneasy and curious all at once. The woman made her way to the town's central square, where a few benches dotted the cobblestone pathway. She sat on one of those benches, watching the activity of the market unfold before her. The market was a simple place, where vendors sold everything from fresh bread to hand-woven baskets. People haggled, children ran around, and life went on as it always had. But there was something different about the way she observed it all. She didn't seem to be judging or criticizing, rather, she appeared to be processing it, as if trying to understand the patterns of life in a world that wasn't her own. It was almost as if she was waiting for something to happen. As the hours passed, a strange air of anticipation seemed to follow her. People began to notice. Some of the older folks, who'd lived in the town for decades, whispered to each other about her. There was talk about how she'd arrived in a way that didn't make sense. No one saw her enter town, and yet, there she was, sitting on the bench like she had always belonged. But what really made people uneasy was the way she kept to herself. She didn't speak to anyone. She didn't seem to need anything. Later that day, a young man named Alex, who worked at the local cafe, found himself curious about the woman. Alex wasn't one to get caught up in rumors or the strange happenings of small-town life. He was a practical person, used to seeing life in simple terms. But the woman intrigued him, and he decided to approach her. He wasn't sure what to say, so he simply smiled and sat down on the empty bench next to her. He hadn't planned on starting a conversation, but before he could think of anything to ask, she turned to him. "Do you believe in the impossible?" she asked in a voice that was soft yet carried a weight to it, as though every word she spoke had a deeper meaning. Alex blinked, surprised by the question. He had never given much thought to things that didn't have a clear explanation. "I suppose I do, in some ways. I mean, who's to say what's possible and what isn't, right?" She studied him for a moment, her gaze intense, as though she were searching for something in his eyes. "What if I told you that I am not from here? That I am not from this world?" Alex laughed nervously, unsure whether she was being serious or if she was just trying to get a rise out of him. "Well, I don't know about that. But you're certainly not from around here, that's for sure. Are you, okay?" She smiled faintly, but there was something bittersweet in the way her lips curled. "I am fine. But I have come for a reason, and I need your help." Alex felt a knot tighten in his stomach. There was something about the way she said those words that made him take her seriously. She wasn't joking. This wasn't just some eccentric traveler passing through. There was a depth to her words, an urgency that tugged at him. He looked around, making sure no one was watching too closely. "What kind of help?" The woman paused, her gaze shifting toward the horizon as if she were contemplating something far beyond the small town. "There are things in this world, in every world, that are not meant to be discovered. But they are out there, and I need someone who can help me find them." Alex felt a chill run through him. This wasn't what he expected. He had thought maybe she needed help finding a place to stay or a way to get back home. But this? It sounded different. Dangerous, even. Are you talking about some kind of treasure hunt or something? Alex asked, trying to lighten the mood, but his voice faltered. No, she said softly. It's much more than that. I am here because something important is lost, something that must be found before it is too late. Alex's curiosity was piqued, despite his better judgment. He knew he should walk away, leave this strange woman to whatever she was doing, but something in her eyes, something in the way she looked at him, made him feel like he couldn't. It was as if her mission had become his mission, too. He hesitated for a moment before finally nodding. Okay. I'll help you. But you'll have to explain more. What are we looking for? The woman's eyes softened, and for a fleeting moment, Alex thought he saw a glimmer of gratitude in them. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice so that only he could hear. I am searching for a key. A key that unlocks the door to another world. Alex's heart skipped a beat. This was no ordinary request. A key to another world? It sounded like something straight out of a science fiction novel. Do you believe in the impossible? She asked in a voice that was soft yet carried a weight to it, as though every word she spoke had a deeper meaning. Alex blinked, surprised by the question. He had never given much thought to things that didn't have a clear explanation. I suppose I do, in some ways. I mean, who's to say what's possible and what isn't, right? She studied him for a moment, her gaze intense, as though she were searching for something in his eyes. What if I told you that I am not from here? That I am not from this world? Alex laughed nervously, unsure whether she was being serious or if she was just trying to get a rise out of him. Well, I don't know about that. But you're certainly not from around here, that's for sure. Are you, okay? She smiled faintly, but there was something bittersweet in the way her lips curled. I am fine. But I have come for a reason, and I need your help. Alex felt a knot tighten in his stomach. There was something about the way she said those words that made him take her seriously. She wasn't joking. This wasn't just some eccentric traveler passing through. There was a depth to her words, an urgency that tugged at him. He looked around, making sure no one was watching too closely. What kind of help? The woman paused, her gaze shifting toward the horizon as if she were contemplating something far beyond the small town. There are things in this world, in every world, that are not meant to be discovered. But they are out there, and I need someone who can help me find them. Alex felt a chill run through him. This wasn't what he expected. He had thought maybe she needed help finding a place to stay or a way to get back home. But this? It sounded different. Dangerous, even. Are you talking about some kind of treasure hunt or something? Alex asked, trying to lighten the mood, but his voice faltered. No, she said softly. It's much more than that. I am here because something important is lost, something that must be found before it is too late. Alex's curiosity was piqued, despite his better judgment. He knew he should walk away, leave this strange woman to whatever she was doing, but something in her eyes, something in the way she looked at him, made him feel like he couldn't. It was as if her mission had become his mission, too. He hesitated for a moment before finally nodding. Okay. I'll help you. But you'll have to explain more. What are we looking for? The woman's eyes softened, and for a fleeting moment, Alex thought he saw a glimmer of gratitude in them. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice so that only he could hear. I am searching for a key. A key that unlocks the door to another world. Alex's heart skipped a beat. This was no ordinary request. A key to another world? It sounded like something straight out of a science fiction novel. But he could see the seriousness in her face, and despite the outlandish nature of her words, Alex felt an overwhelming pull to help her. I know it's hard to believe, she continued, sensing his doubt. "But I wouldn't ask you for help if I didn't think you could be a part of this. The key is hidden here, in this town. And once we find it, everything will change." Alex stared at her for a long moment, the weight of her words sinking in. The possibility of discovering something beyond the limits of what he knew was both thrilling and terrifying. But in that moment, Alex realized that his life was about to take a turn he never could have predicted. And so, without fully understanding what he was getting himself into, Alex agreed to help. The journey ahead would be one of mystery, discovery, and danger. But it would also be a journey that would change the course of his life forever. Little did he know, the connection he was about to form with this woman would not only alter his understanding of the world but also challenge everything he thought he knew about himself. But for now, as the sun began to set over the town, Alex took a deep breath and prepared for whatever lay ahead. He didn't know where this path would lead, but he knew he couldn't turn back now. The next day, Alex couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in his chest. He went about his morning routine at the cafe, making coffee and serving pastries, but his mind was elsewhere. Every time he tried to focus, images of the woman's face, her bright eyes, and her words crept into his thoughts. The idea of a key to another world, something that sounded more like a fantastical story than reality, was gnawing at him. As the cafe became quieter in the afternoon, Alex found a moment to sit at the back, staring at the door where the woman had entered the day before. He had agreed to help her, but now the gravity of that decision was starting to hit him. What if she was just a strange traveler with an overactive imagination? What if he was making a mistake by getting involved? His train of thought was interrupted when the door swung open, and there she was again, seemingly appearing out of nowhere, just as she had the day before. She looked calm, composed, and almost expectant. The tension in the air was undeniable. It was as if she knew Alex had been thinking about her, as if she had been waiting for him. Without a word, she made her way toward him, her movements fluid and deliberate. When she reached the counter, Alex stood up, instinctively wanting to greet her, though unsure of what to say. "I'm ready," she said simply, her voice steady. Alex nodded, swallowing his nerves. "All right. Where do we start?" The woman's eyes twinkled, but there was no hint of amusement in them. She wasn't here to play games. She was here for something serious. "We start by going to the old library," she said. "It's hidden, but not many people know about it. There's a section there, a section that has been untouched for years. It's where the key is." Alex wasn't sure what to make of this. The library wasn't exactly the first place most people thought to go when looking for something hidden, and Alex had spent enough time in town to know that the library was a quiet, almost forgotten place. It was full of old books, relics of the past that hadn't been touched in decades. Still, there was something in her tone that made him feel like this was no coincidence. "Do you think someone else is looking for it?" Alex asked, his curiosity growing. "Someone already has," she replied, her voice softening just a touch. "And they're not going to stop until they find it first." A chill ran through Alex. He had assumed that this search would be something simple, something just between him and this mysterious woman. But hearing her mention someone else made him realize that this wasn't just a matter of helping her. They were in a race, and someone else was hunting the same thing. "That's why I need you," she added, as if reading his mind. "The key is hidden in plain sight, but it's more than just a physical object. It's a symbol, a representation of something much greater. You must see beyond what's in front of you." Alex nodded, not fully understanding, but willing to follow her lead. He didn't know who was after the key or why they wanted it, but one thing was certain: whatever this woman was looking for, it was more than just a treasure or some trinket. Together, they left the cafe and made their way toward the library. As they walked, Alex couldn't help but feel the weight of what he was about to do. Every step took him deeper into a world he couldn't yet comprehend, and the further they walked, the more the sense of urgency grew. The library loomed ahead, its old, stone walls seemed to whisper secrets, holding stories and knowledge that time had almost forgotten. Alex's heart began to race. They were on the verge of something that would change everything. And as they reached the entrance, he realized that his life would never be the same again. The library was quiet, almost too quiet. The building itself was old, its stone walls covered in ivy, and the windows, though large, seemed to let in only a dim, filtered light. It had the feel of a place that time had forgotten. Most of the town's people had long since stopped coming here, preferring the more modern conveniences elsewhere. But there was something comforting about it for Alex. Even though he couldn't explain why, he felt like he was stepping into a world that had secrets waiting to be uncovered. The woman led him through the heavy wooden doors without hesitation. The smell of old books and dust filled the air, a familiar scent that made Alex's mind wander to his childhood, when he'd spent hours at the library, buried in stories of adventure and discovery. But today, this place felt different, more mysterious, like the books themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. They walked deeper into the library, past rows and rows of forgotten tomes, their spines cracked and worn. It was hard to imagine that anyone would want to search for something hidden here, among so many old stories and relics of a bygone era. But the woman was not looking at the books. She moved with purpose, her gaze sharp and focused, scanning the library as though she knew exactly where she was headed. "Where is it?" Alex asked quietly, unable to contain his curiosity. "What exactly are we looking for?" The woman stopped in front of a dusty wooden door, half hidden behind a bookshelf. The door was small, barely noticeable, and looked like it hadn't been opened in years. "This is it," she said, her voice low. "The hidden section." Alex looked at the door skeptically. It didn't look like anything special. In fact, it looked like it could have been just part of the wall, a space that had been forgotten in time. "Are you sure?" he asked. She nodded, her expression grave. "Yes. This is where the key is hidden." She pushed open the door, revealing a narrow stairway that led downward into the darkness. The air was thick with the smell of age and decay, and the only sound was the faint creak of the wooden steps beneath their feet as they descended. The stairs spiraled down into a basement-like room that seemed to stretch further than the building itself should have allowed. The woman led Alex into the room, her movements quick and deliberate, as if she were already familiar with its layout. The room was dimly lit, and Alex could just make out shelves filled with more books, old, fragile volumes that had been stored away long ago, out of sight and out of mind. But there was something unsettling about the space. The walls felt oppressive, and the air was damp, as if the room itself was alive, breathing, holding secrets. "Is this where the key is?" Alex asked, his voice breaking the silence. The woman didn't answer immediately. She walked past several shelves, her fingers trailing along the spines of the books. Finally, she stopped in front of a large, ornate chest sitting in the far corner of the room. It was unlike any chest Alex had ever seen, carved with intricate designs, with strange symbols and markings that seemed to shimmer faintly in the low light. The chest looked ancient, but it also looked alive, as though it were waiting for something. "This is it," she said softly, her voice tinged with reverence. "The key is inside this chest." Alex took a cautious step forward, his heart beating faster. He didn't know why, but he could feel the gravity of the moment. This chest held something that had the power to change everything. He could sense it in the air, a sort of invisible tension that surrounded them both. The woman bent down and, with a quick, practiced motion, unlocked the chest. It opened with a creak, revealing a small, ornate box inside. The box was made of a metal that Alex didn't recognize, and it was decorated with similar symbols to the ones on the chest. The box looked delicate, almost fragile, but there was an undeniable aura of power around it. "This is the key," the woman said, her voice almost a whisper. She carefully picked up the box, cradling it in her hands as if it were the most precious thing in the world. Alex reached out instinctively, but she stopped him with a gesture. "No," she said. "It must be handled with care. This is not something that should be opened lightly." "But what is it?" Alex asked, his voice filled with wonder and fear. "What does it do?" She met his gaze, her eyes serious and unwavering. "This box contains the key to another world. A world that is hidden just beyond the veil of what we know. The key opens the door to that world, a world of endless possibilities, but also a world full of danger." Alex's mind raced. Another world? A door to a place that no one had ever seen before? It sounded impossible. But standing in the dim, eerie room, with the box in the woman's hands, Alex couldn't deny the strange sense of certainty that washed over him. "We can't let anyone else find this," she continued. "If the wrong person gets their hands on it, they could unleash something that would change everything. This key must stay hidden. And now that you're here, you're a part of this, whether you like it or not." Alex swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words. There was no turning back now. He had crossed a line, stepping into a world far bigger than anything he had ever imagined. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized he didn't want to turn back. Something inside him stirred, a desire for something more, something bigger than the life he had known. He nodded slowly. "I understand. But what do we do next?" The woman looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Now we make sure the key stays hidden. And we find a way to keep it safe, before anyone else comes looking for it." The air in the dimly lit room grew heavy, thick with the weight of the decision that had just been made. Alex could feel the tension in his chest, his thoughts swirling like a storm. He had always believed that life in this quiet town was simple, predictable. But now, standing beside this mysterious woman with the box that contained a key to another world, he realized how wrong he had been. The woman carefully placed the small, ornate box back into the chest and locked it with a single, deliberate motion. The sound of the lock clicking into place echoed in the room, a stark reminder of how powerful and important this key was. Alex knew that this wasn't just about finding something hidden, it was about protecting something that could change everything, not just for them, but for the entire world. "I don't understand," Alex said, his voice low. "Why did you choose me? Why not someone else? There must be someone else more qualified for this, someone who knows more about all of this." The woman turned to face him, her expression soft but unwavering. "Because you're the one who can see it," she said simply. "Most people would walk into this room and think it's just a chest full of old books and forgotten secrets. But you understand that there's something more. You felt it from the moment you agreed to help me, didn't you?" Alex hesitated, thinking back to that moment when he had decided to follow her, when he had agreed to help her search for the key. She was right, something inside him had shifted, as if a part of him had woken up to the possibility of something greater than the life he had known. He had felt it, but he hadn't been able to put it into words. "I guess I do," he admitted, his voice quiet. "But what does this all mean? If this key unlocks another world, what kind of world are we talking about? And who's after it? Who else knows about this?" The woman's gaze darkened, and for the first time, Alex saw a flicker of something almost fearful in her eyes. "There are forces at play, Alex. People, or perhaps not even people, who are after the key. They have their own reasons for wanting it, and those reasons are far darker than anything you could imagine. Whoever controls the key controls access to a power that no one should wield." Alex's stomach churned as he processed her words. Power. A world beyond the one he knew. It was almost too much to wrap his head around. Everything he thought he knew about reality felt like it was crumbling around him, and all he could do was stand there, trying to grasp onto something solid. "What happens if we can't stop them?" he asked, the question slipping out before he could think better of it. The woman's expression hardened, and she took a step closer to him, her voice now steady and firm. Then everything you've ever known could be lost. The key must never fall into the wrong hands, Alex. If it does, it will open a door to chaos, to a world that isn't meant to be found. And the consequences could be far worse than you can imagine. Alex swallowed hard. He wasn't sure whether it was fear or the weight of the responsibility that was making his chest tighten. The thought of the wrong people finding the key, unlocking whatever lay beyond the door, was terrifying. What if they couldn't stop it? What if they weren't enough? "We'll keep it hidden," he said, his voice firm. He wasn't sure how, but something inside him told him that this was the only option. If they didn't protect the key, the world could change in ways they couldn't predict. And Alex wasn't willing to let that happen, not if he could do something about it. The woman nodded approvingly. "Good. But we can't do this alone. We need to find allies, people who can help us protect the key. And we need to move quickly. Time is not on our side." Alex nodded, his mind racing. "Who do we turn to?" She thought for a moment before speaking. "There are others like me, people who understand the significance of the key. They are scattered, hidden in places you would never expect. Some of them are keeping an eye on the world's balance, making sure things don't fall apart. But not all of them are friendly." Alex felt a chill at the mention of enemies, hidden allies, and secretive figures who watched the world's balance. He hadn't signed up for anything like this. He had just been an ordinary guy, living an ordinary life. Now, he was being pulled into something far larger, something that seemed beyond his control. But as much as he wanted to turn back, to forget everything he had learned in the last 24 hours, Alex knew he couldn't. "Where do we start?" he asked, determination edging into his voice. He had made a choice, and now he would see it through. The woman turned toward the chest again, her hand resting lightly on it as she looked at him. "We start by finding the first of our allies. Someone who can help us protect the key. We'll need their strength, their knowledge, and their trust. But it won't be easy. The road ahead will be dangerous, and we'll need to be prepared for whatever comes next." Alex nodded once more. The weight of the responsibility was still heavy on his shoulders, but now there was no turning back. He was in this, whether he was ready or not. As the woman turned toward the door, Alex followed her, feeling the pull of whatever journey lay ahead. The world as he knew it had changed, and he was no longer just a bystander. He was part of something bigger, something that would test everything he thought he knew about the world, and about himself. The woman led Alex out of the hidden room, back into the dusty aisles of the library. The heavy wooden door creaked as it closed behind them, sealing the key away once more. The atmosphere in the library felt almost oppressive now, as though the building itself was aware of the danger that had been unleashed by their discovery. As they walked back toward the main hall, Alex couldn't help but feel that the weight of the secret they were carrying had only just begun to sink in. They exited the library into the fading light of the late afternoon. The town was quiet as usual, the streets empty except for a few stragglers finishing their errands. But Alex now saw it all through a different lens, as though the world around him had shifted just slightly, and he was suddenly aware of how much was at stake. The quiet town he had always known was now full of hidden corners, things lurking just out of sight, waiting to be discovered. "So, who's the first ally?" Alex asked as they walked side by side, his mind still reeling from everything that had happened. The woman walked ahead, her steps measured and calm, as though the weight of their mission didn't affect her. "Someone who understands what we're dealing with," she said, her voice quiet but resolute. "Someone who knows the balance between worlds and has the power to protect it. They'll be hard to find, but they are out there." Alex's mind raced. Another ally? He hadn't even fully processed the first part of the mission, protecting the key. And now, they were already looking for more help. He felt like he was being swept along on a current he couldn't control. "How do you know they'll help us?" Alex asked. "What if they don't believe us? What if they think we're just crazy." The woman gave him a sidelong glance. "They'll believe us. But you're right about one thing, they'll want to know why we're looking for help. And we'll have to prove to them that we're serious. This is no small matter, Alex. The key is just the beginning. There's so much more at stake." The street lamps flickered on as the evening sky turned a deep shade of purple. The air had grown cooler, and Alex pulled his jacket tighter around himself. He glanced at the woman again, wondering what kind of world she was from. She spoke with such certainty, such quiet confidence. She didn't seem shaken by anything. The world she was talking about, with its balance of worlds and dangerous forces, was so far removed from his own reality, yet here he was, in the middle of it all. They walked for what felt like hours, passing the familiar shops, houses, and streets that Alex had walked down 1,000 times. But nothing seemed familiar anymore. Everywhere he looked, he saw hidden dangers, potential threats, and secrets just beneath the surface. It was as though his whole world had been turned upside down, and he wasn't sure which direction to go in anymore. Eventually, they stopped in front of a small, unassuming house at the edge of town. It was tucked away in a quiet corner, surrounded by thick trees and overgrown bushes. The house looked ordinary at first glance, but there was something about it that felt different, almost alive. The woman stood still for a moment, as if sensing something, before stepping up to the door and knocking 3 times in quick succession. After a few moments, the door creaked open, revealing a woman who looked older than the rest of the townspeople, her face lined with years of wisdom and experience. Her eyes were sharp, scanning both the woman and Alex with a piercing gaze that seemed to take in everything at once. "You've come for help," the older woman said, her voice gravelly but calm. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. She already knew why they were here. The woman nodded, stepping forward. "We need your assistance. The key has been found, and there are others after it." The older woman's expression darkened. She stepped aside, allowing them into the house without another word. Inside, the house was dim, lit by the flickering glow of candles and the soft crackle of a fire in the hearth. Shelves lined the walls, filled with books and strange objects that Alex couldn't identify. The air smelled of herbs and something faintly metallic. Once inside, the older woman closed the door behind them, locking it with a swift motion. "I suspected this day would come," she murmured, more to herself than to them. "The balance is shifting, and when that happens, it's only a matter of time before the door opens." Alex felt a shiver run down his spine at her words. "What do you mean, the balance?" he asked. "What door? What's really going on here?" The woman turned to face him, her eyes narrowing as she sized him up. "You don't understand yet, do you?" she asked, her voice almost gentle now. "You've just scratched the surface. The key, this world, the door to another one, it's all connected. And if we're going to stop what's coming, we have to act quickly. The key is far more dangerous than you can imagine." Alex swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. The key, the door, the balance between worlds, it was all starting to feel like a nightmare. But no matter how much he wished it wasn't real, he knew deep down that it was. And now, there was no turning back. "We'll do what we can," the woman said, her voice firm. "But know this, the path we're on is fraught with danger. And the forces we're up against will stop at nothing to get what they want." Alex nodded, his mind racing. He had already come too far to turn back now. But as the door to this new world opened before him, he had no idea how deep the rabbit hole would go. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows on the walls as the older woman motioned for Alex and the woman to sit. There was a sense of finality in the air, as if the moment they had walked through that door, there was no turning back. The room, filled with the scent of herbs and candles, suddenly felt like a place of secrets, ancient and powerful. Alex could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him. The older woman, who had introduced herself simply as the Guardian, stood near the fire, her eyes far away, as though she was contemplating something beyond their current understanding. After a long pause, she turned to face them. "The key you've found is not merely a physical object," she began, her voice low and deliberate. "It is a bridge. A bridge between worlds, and not just any worlds, worlds that exist beyond the limits of our understanding. We live in one layer of existence, but the key opens doors to layers that are unknown, dangerous, and full of unimaginable power." Alex stared at her, trying to process her words. Layers of existence? Another world? He had always assumed that the world they lived in was the only one that mattered. Now, the idea that there were more, hidden behind a veil, seemed like a riddle with no answer. "You're saying this key leads to another world," Alex said slowly. "But why is it so dangerous? What's on the other side of that door?" The Guardian met his gaze, her eyes sharp and full of a knowledge Alex couldn't fathom. "The other side is not what you think it is. There are beings, entities, that exist in those worlds. Some are ancient, others are new, but all are bound by a different set of rules, different laws of nature. They are more powerful than we could ever imagine. The key isn't just a doorway, it's a beacon. It calls to them." Alex felt a chill run through him. The thought of something, someone, responding to the call of the key made his skin crawl. What kind of entities were they talking about? And what did they want with the key? "The key was never meant to be found," the Guardian continued, her voice growing darker. "It was hidden away centuries ago to protect us. But as time passes, the forces beyond the veil grow restless. They seek to break through and claim what is theirs. If the wrong people, or beings, gain control of the key, they will have access to power beyond measure." Alex leaned forward, the gravity of the situation finally sinking in. "So, someone else is looking for it, someone who wants to use it?" The Guardian nodded. "There are others who understand its importance, and they are not here to protect it. They are here to control it. They will stop at nothing to find it, and when they do, the door will open, and all hell will break loose." Alex's heart pounded in his chest. It was all starting to feel too real, too close. He had always believed in simple truths: what you saw was what you got, nothing more. But now, he was in the midst of something so much bigger, so much more dangerous, than anything he had ever known. "You must protect it," the Guardian said, her tone unwavering. "I know you don't fully understand what's at stake, but you must trust that the key has chosen you. You are part of a larger story, one that has been unfolding for centuries. The key will guide you, but only if you protect it with your life." Alex swallowed hard, his throat dry. He wasn't a hero. The older woman, who had introduced herself simply as the Guardian, stood near the fire, her eyes far away, as though she was contemplating something beyond their current understanding. After a long pause, she turned to face them. "The key you've found is not merely a physical object," she began, her voice low and deliberate. "It is a bridge. A bridge between worlds, and not just any worlds, worlds that exist beyond the limits of our understanding. We live in one layer of existence, but the key opens doors to layers that are unknown, dangerous, and full of unimaginable power." Alex stared at her, trying to process her words. Layers of existence? Another world? He had always assumed that the world they lived in was the only one that mattered. Now, the idea that there were more, hidden behind a veil, seemed like a riddle with no answer. "You're saying this key leads to another world," Alex said slowly. "But why is it so dangerous? What's on the other side of that door?" The Guardian met his gaze, her eyes sharp and full of a knowledge Alex couldn't fathom. "The other side is not what you think it is. There are beings, entities, that exist in those worlds. Some are ancient, others are new, but all are bound by a different set of rules, different laws of nature. They are more powerful than we could ever imagine. The key isn't just a doorway, it's a beacon. It calls to them. Alex felt a chill run through him. The thought of someone, responding to the call of the key made his skin crawl. What kind of entities were they talking about? And what did they want with the key? The key was never meant to be found, the Guardian continued, her voice growing darker. It was hidden away centuries ago to protect us. But as time passes, the forces beyond the veil grow restless. They seek to break through and claim what is theirs. If the wrong people, or beings, gain control of the key, they will have access to power beyond measure. Alex leaned forward, the gravity of the situation finally sinking in. So, someone else is looking for it, someone who wants to use it? The Guardian nodded. There are others who understand its importance, and they are not here to protect it. They are here to control it. They will stop at nothing to find it, and when they do, the door will open, and all hell will break loose. Alex's heart pounded in his chest. It was all starting to feel too real, too close. He had always believed in simple truths: what you saw was what you got, nothing more. But now, he was in the midst of something so much bigger, so much more dangerous, than anything he had ever known. You must protect it, the Guardian said, her tone unwavering. I know you don't fully understand what's at stake, but you must trust that the key has chosen you. You are part of a larger story, one that has been unfolding for centuries. The key will guide you, but only if you protect it with your life. Alex swallowed hard, his throat dry. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't anyone special. He was just a guy from a small town, living a quiet life. But now, he had a responsibility, a duty he never asked for but couldn't escape. What do we do now? Alex asked, his voice a little shakier than he would have liked. He had to admit, he wasn't entirely sure he could handle this, but there was no turning back now. The Guardian's eyes softened, and for the first time, there was a hint of understanding in her gaze. You'll need to gather allies. More of us exist, scattered across the world, waiting for the right moment. You will have to find them, convince them to help you, and together, you can guard the key. But be careful. Not everyone who seeks the key wants to protect it. Some will deceive you, others will try to manipulate you. The woman beside Alex, who had been silent up until now, spoke for the first time since entering the Guardian's home. We'll need to move quickly. The longer we wait, the more vulnerable we become. The forces are already in motion. The Guardian nodded, her face hardening. Then it begins. The key must stay hidden, and you must be prepared for the battles ahead. The ones who seek it will come for you, and when they do, you must be ready. Alex stood, his hands shaking slightly as he ran them through his hair. His life had been turned upside down in a matter of days, and the world he had known was slipping through his fingers like sand. He wasn't ready for this, but it didn't matter. There was no choice now. He had to step up, not just for himself, but for the world that was in danger. He looked at the woman who had brought him into this strange world of keys, doors, and other realities. She had seemed so certain, so confident, and now, Alex understood why. She wasn't just protecting herself, she was protecting everything. And if they didn't stop the wrong people from finding the key, everything they knew could be destroyed. Where do we go next? Alex asked, his voice filled with determination. The woman stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. We go where the key takes us. And we'll face whatever comes, together. And with that, they stepped into the unknown, leaving the quiet town behind, knowing that they were no longer just running from their past, they were racing against time to protect the future.